What's up, guys? It's Cassie and Grogu here, who's joining me for today's video. And today's topic will be specifically about Gen Z's mental health crisis, specifically with regards to loneliness. Now, guys, I have done a video on this previously, but it was more the general loneliness epidemic that we're currently going through. However, today's topic is more specific to Gen Z's mental crisis and its relationship with loneliness. Now, guys, this issue is very near and dear to my heart. I think it's something that we unfortunately don't know how to approach. It's a really hard discussion to have, and it's a problem that's affected everyone, whether it's a sibling or a cousin or a friend. I can almost guarantee that you who are viewing this video right now know somebody who's struggling with loneliness and the depression that comes from it. The loneliness that we talk about specifically today in today's society is a little bit different in comparison to other generations. So I wanted to do a deeper dive, even though I've done a video on this. Like I said, you could see it here if you haven't seen it yet. But again, that's more of the general loneliness epidemic that's going on across all generations. But today I specifically want to target and talk about Gen Z's mental crisis and how it relates to loneliness. The reason why I also think it's really important is because I find that with each newer generation, it just gets worse and worse. And I think it's important to really tackle this problem head on and try to figure out a solution. The only way to find a solution is really discussing it more. So that is why today we're going to do a deeper dive into it. Now, there was a study done that showed that 72% of Gen Z struggled with some type of loneliness. It's just like sadness. It's a feeling that everyone has gone through or has felt at some point in their life. Even loneliness, even if you have family and friends all around you, sometimes you can have moments of loneliness. That is a normal and natural feeling. However, this never-ending sense of loneliness, this unending doom that one can feel because of the loneliness can actually end up being more serious and cause more issues and problems in your life. So I definitely want to highlight that because this isn't the loneliness in the traditional sense of like, okay, everyone gets lonely at some time. What's the big deal? But this is a more severe form of loneliness. And unfortunately, it's affecting our youngest generation, which is pretty bad because, okay, granted, I mean, not that it's easy for anyone, even adults to deal with, but imagine a kid dealing with this, an adult, at least we may to some degree have some type of tools in our tool set to deal with it or the maturity level to deal with it. But kids specifically have no life experience, sometimes no role models to look forward to. There's nothing that they can base solutions off of. And because of that, they end up not having a way out of it. It's almost like they just marinate in this loneliness. And personally, I think that's very sad for a child to go through that, for a kid to go through that. And so the fact that 72% of Gen Z is struggling with this is mind-blowing. Okay, so I want to start off obviously with the problems, and eventually we'll get to the solutions at the end of this video. Of course, there's the obvious problems, technology, right? We all have heard it. The phones are ruining the kids. They're ruining our new generation. And yeah, to some degree it is. Now, I personally grew up when MySpace was the thing. I didn't even have my own personal phone until I was like maybe 15. I had the Firefly. For those of you who know, the Firefly it is a phone, but you can only contact like two people, which is basically mom and dad. And then I don't even remember if I could message them, or I could message them, but I could only send certain types of messages. It was a very, very minimal feature type of phone. But at the same time, it was for emergencies. That's why my parents agreed to get me the Firefly. But I remember being so embarrassed to have it around because everyone had the pink Razor. And I wanted the pink Razor or that slidey phone. I forget what it was, but I think it was the LG slide phone. Anyways, my point being, I'm very grateful that my parents, in a way, protected me from being exposed to the phone, the internet. I didn't have access to that. I honestly think I would have been too innocent. I would have just been curious to explore. Not that I knew about all the negative things that were on the internet. It would have been out of pure curiosity. So I'm really grateful and glad that my parents protected me from that. And in a way, sure, you can call it overbearing, whatever, but I'm grateful for it. I don't have any resentment. That's actually one of the criticisms of this. A lot of people, they criticize parents for not allowing their kids to have phones, saying that the reason is that, oh, your kids are going to come out socially awkward. They're going to resent you when they get older. Okay, maybe it's anecdotal. I wasn't that case. I didn't have a phone for a long time and I didn't have access to a lot of things, and I carried no resentment towards my parents. If anything, the opposite. I feel so grateful, incredibly blessed that they did. In the moment, sure, I was upset. I was jealous of my other friends who had it. But today, as an adult, I'm so grateful I wasn't exposed. I had to touch grass because that was the only other thing I could do. If not, I would have been at home all day, and I would even get in trouble just for doing nothing at home all day. That was like a thing I could get punished for. I had to do something. Touch grass, go outside, do something. I've always been very entrepreneurial. So my form of play was I used to sell M&Ms and candy to all the neighborhood kids. And there were a lot of kids. That was back in the days when kids were always running around outside and on their bikes. And yeah, I had a lot of customers. Like I said, I've always had a very entrepreneurial spirit. So I've been doing that since I was a kid. That was my form of play. That was my form of fun. And I'm so glad that those are really great memories that I have. I don't have any memories of scrolling on my bed or something like that because I just didn't have the phone. It wasn't until later that I got a phone. And a lot of you may relate to this. A lot of you weren't exposed to it at an early age. And great, that's awesome because you probably had a similar experience. And probably most of you could agree that we didn't come out resenting our parents. I think that was just a myth that was told to everyone. It was that whole FOMO, that fear of missing out. I don't want my kid to be the only one who doesn't have a phone. And you know what? You may not reap the benefits now, but later on when they're older, when they're an adult and they're mature enough, they will be thanking you. I promise you. Okay, so the phones. So I'm not going to just brush over it because it is still an important factor in this, but phones have created this false world curated just for you. Think about it. It's like a self-vortex in a way. It's created this illusion that almost like you're the only person in the world. And obviously that can contribute to a sense of loneliness. You feel alone in your world. Now, what do I mean by this? The phone is basically both a curse and a blessing. It creates this false sense of you're the only one in the world. The reason why I say this is because on your phone, it's very personalized. You can personalize everything to you. The color, the settings. On social media platforms, even your algorithm is tailored to you. So even in a way, social media, the world of social media, it can create this fake illusion that everything in a way is like about you. There's no sense of things outside of me, other people's interests, other people's passions, other people's struggles. It's always about my struggles. It's always about everything is personalized for me. So it creates this fake illusion. It creates this false sense of reality because that's not reality. Okay, maybe your phone is personalized to your life and everything and all your interests, but the real world doesn't reflect that. Okay, the real world doesn't, to be quite frank with you, doesn't really care what your interests are, doesn't care what your passions or struggles are. And in a way, it's very refreshing because the world is what it is. And you might find things that interest you. You might find things that you didn't know you were interested in by going out into the world and experiencing the reality and accepting that the reality may not always reflect all of our inner desires and inner interests. And of course, if we're not exposing ourselves to reality and only exposing ourselves to our own personal lives, it's almost like a little fake mini, like for me in my case, fake mini Cassie's world. Here's Cassie's world. And I assume that the rest of the world reflects this. But that's just not the case. Now, granted, you can't have a healthy balance, right? As long as you're aware of that and you're constantly reminding yourself. But I would say it would be better to have more time spent in the reality world rather than your mini world on your phone. So obviously that's going to require a lot of accountability. Now this leads to my next question. How have societal structures evolved? Okay, practicing being obsessed with technology is a major issue too. So I don't want to say technology in itself is evil. It's just like the argument of money. Okay, money isn't inherently evil. It's what you do with it. It's when there's a saying that when you are the master of money, you can use it for good. But when money is the master of you, it becomes bad. Same thing with technology. I don't think technology in itself is evil. It's just the way you use it. It's how you use it is what determines whether it's good or bad. Of course, because of social media, so many great things have happened. Even on a local level, people like find their dogs. You know, if their dog goes missing, they'll post it, they find their dog. A lot of people are found that way. It's reaching a larger scale of people on a faster level, and that can make certain missions much more efficient. So things can be used for good, or even charities raising money for fundraisers. You can obviously raise much more money if you are able to reach people on a larger scale and in a faster and shorter amount of time. Some people take the approach of technology in itself, social media in itself is evil, inherently evil, and you should stay away from it by all means. But that's just not the reality. I guess theoretically you could separate yourself completely from that world, and that would be fine because we already did that, right? And historically speaking, we didn't have social media in the past. It should be used as a tool, and when it's not being used as a tool, that's when a superpower can become our own worst enemy. What's happened is we've normalized being on technology so much, even though we know, right? All of us have known, oh yeah, like it's not good to be on social media. We know that, but we've normalized being on it even for hours and hours a day to the point where even though we know it's not good for us, we're okay with doing doing because we've normalized it. We think it's normal to do it. I think it was St. Augustine. Even if everyone is doing a particular activity, doesn't make that activity good. And even if a small minority group are doing an activity, doesn't make that activity bad. You really shouldn't discern what you do and don't do based off what the majority of people are doing. So in this case, like I said, we've normalized this. We're way past normalizing social media and technology to the point where we would just be on it. And obviously younger generations, sometimes just to get the kid to be quiet, you just put an iPad in front of them. They practice being on technology. And honestly, that's not their fault. A lot of the fault falls on the parents. It was just easier to do that. And I don't mean to put down parents. I understand it's really hard, but sometimes taking the easy way out isn't the solution. And as we all know, kids especially their attention span is so much shorter. So it's almost like if a video is past like 30 seconds, they won't watch it. Probably not even watching this video because it's definitely way past 30 seconds. You want this instant gratification, and it causes this obsession similar to a drug because that's exactly how drugs work, okay? You want that high feeling. And over time, you don't get the high as easily as you did in the past, so you crave more and more extreme versions of it, eventually resulting in an obsession or some type of addiction. Okay, and of course, everyone's mentioned this, but the COVID lockdowns obviously did not help the problem, but if anything, contributed even more because it isolated everyone. You couldn't have any contact with anyone, your friends, family members. Now it's one thing being an adult going through COVID, right? Going through COVID lockdowns. Imagine being a kid and being raised in COVID lockdowns. You assume that that's the norm. You've just no socialization. You didn't even know that you were getting no socialization because you assumed that that was the norm. Everyone my age is just not socializing, and that's just the norm. It's even more sad because they don't even know what they're missing out on. At least older adults, at least we have something to compare it to. That's why you always hear older people say, oh, the good old days, and they're very nostalgic about it, past time. Personally, I like to think about the early 2000s. I really like watching, video clips on like Instagram. It's like the 90s, and it's just a different time, a different vibe. And Gen Z and Gen Alpha have nothing to compare it to. Maybe they can watch videos, but it's like being nostalgic for something they never lived through, or being nostalgic for something they never experienced. They have nothing to compare it to. They only know what they actually lived through. And I feel really bad. I like I said, this is not a video meant to put down Gen Z or Gen Alpha or millennials. The point of this video is to observe a problem, be honest about the problem, and try to find solutions as a result of that honesty. We can make up solutions that just maybe sound good to us, but if it doesn't end up solving the problem, then what was the point? COVID lockdowns had a huge impact, okay? It was maybe for us introverts, we probably enjoyed it for a little bit, but I can see how detrimental it was to everyone as a whole, okay? I don't want to make this as like an isolated problem just for Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I know everyone suffered through it, and to be isolated for such a long time and to have no practice, I was talking earlier about practicing with technology. There was no practicing of socializing. There was no practicing of even small talk, which obviously a lot of older generations will complain about how bad Gen Z, Gen Alpha, even millennials are with small talk. And that's honestly because Of course, we're going to be bad at it because we never had the chance to practice it. Or there was maybe when we just started practicing it, all of a sudden COVID lockdowns happened and now we had no chance to continue practicing it. How do you expect me to be really good at Spanish if I never got the chance to practice it? If nobody ever taught me, I didn't have anyone to speak Spanish with, and then I come out of something and you're asked, hey, why aren't you fluent in Spanish? Well, of course, how am I going to be fluent in Spanish? I didn't practice it. I do know Spanish, by the way. Another result of the COVID lockdowns was also the normalizing of remote work. Now, don't get me wrong, remote work to a certain degree, especially if you travel a lot, is great. Before COVID lockdowns, just for those of you who don't remember, remote work was definitely a privilege. It was very rare. It wasn't very common. You wouldn't really meet people who had remote jobs. It was usually due to a specific reason. So although there are positive things in remote work, there are also obviously the negative side. Negative things like, again, not practicing that socializing, not practicing conversations, small talk, even the skill of evading certain conversations. That is a skill. To have a polite conversation with someone that maybe you don't like, there's so much technique to it and skill. And obviously communication is key, not only in the workspace, but in dating and in your personal life. The fact that people aren't practicing it for such a long time, I would imagine that it would affect all areas of their life, work and personal life. Communication and the way we speak and interact with people is such an important and big pillar of society, and the fact that has been weakened only it only makes sense if that pillar's been weakened, then society's going to weaken. It's kind of funny because the way social media works, like I said earlier, we start to think, it's almost like even unconsciously, we start to think that the way the algorithm works on social media is the way there's like some type of algorithm in our own world, like even the reality world, right? The realistic world. We start to think, oh, like if I can curate and personalize my algorithm here, then I could personalize my algorithm in real life. And therefore I'll take out all the things I don't like and only see, that's my point, is you cannot isolate and overprotect yourself from other things in the world, other viewpoints, other perspectives, other people in general. You cannot, if you I understand doing it to a certain point so that you don't allow certain things into your life. However, if you go overboard and, like I said, try to curate and make your little algorithm in the real world and don't expose yourself, if you overdo it to the point where you are overly regulating what you interact with, that is also not realistic, and you're only just trying to replicate your world on social media. Again, we create this warped sense of reality. It's become distorted. There's a lot of great and good things in the world. It's what happens is when we distort things. It's when we pervert it. All evil is some type of perversion of the good. Okay, evil in itself, it can't exist by itself. It has to pervert. It's like a leech or a mold. It needs a host in order to do its damage. Okay, the bacteria can't do anything unless it has its host. Or maybe I'm confusing with a virus. I think it's the virus, right? See, this is why I did not go down the medical field. It needs a host in order to do its damage. Without the host, it can't do anything. That's exactly how evil works. Okay, evil needs its host. Goodness, any type of goodness. It needs to have goodness to pervert it, to do damage. And then you see the fruit of evil. Now, this perversion of goodness is also translated into the dating world. Okay, dating in itself is good. It's great. It has its downsides, but dating in itself and getting to meet a potential romantic partner is great. However, it doesn't come without its struggles. Okay, I saw this comment, and it's a comment that I keep seeing in different videos, and this person has a point. Where is someone supposed to meet someone else these days? Coffee shops, parks, stores, libraries. Everyone has headphones in, even if you go there. It's true. Everyone has headphones in, and you might be called a creep for approaching someone. People don't want to be bothered in public. Work relationships are always a huge risk. True. I'm confused about how in this digital age we're supposed to connect to a complete stranger. And even in the dating world, if you go on a date with another person, they have 3 or 4 more dates set up for that week. And it's because they can easily do so through a dating app. And somehow you're supposed to make this all work while working long, hard hours to pay rent or a mortgage. It's like a catch-22. You have to do this in order to do this, but you can't do this until you do this first. I mean, no wonder people throw their hands up in the air and say, I give up. I am done with the dating world. I am done with trying to make something happen. That is the current mentality today, and it is so sad. I'm just so passionate about this because it can be changed. This doesn't have to be your fate. There is hope, and I just urge you, if you who are watching this video feel that sense of giving up and just done with it and just accepting it and settling for an unextraordinary life, I hope I can give you hope. Okay, it is not easy, but if everything was easy, everyone would do it. Okay, and there's a reason why not everyone can do it, because it's hard. But just because something's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I mean, haven't you seen The Lord of the Rings? He was living his happy, peaceful little life as a hobbit. From a simplistic viewpoint, there was no reason for him to go on this very difficult journey full of suffering. But in the end, it was the purpose. It was what came at the end. It was the price he paid was totally worth it. That was the adventure. That is why we watch and love The Lord of the Rings, because it's that sense of adventure. It's that sense of striving. We know we're going on an adventure that we don't even know we're capable of fulfilling, but we do it anyways. Now, I touched on this a little bit earlier in this video about confusing reality with our make-believe world on our phones. I want to come back to this because obviously there's the instant gratification that comes with media consumption, right? We train our brains, and there's like a whole science behind consuming a lot of media, and it just changes the way our brains work. We've seen this even in darker areas like the corn industry, and just the really negative effects that it has on brains and just the way you think and your personal life and the way it affects your relationships. But also, media consumption in general does something parallel to that. It really rots the brain, and it distorts the way we look at things. So specifically, I'm talking about conversations. So like I said, I did touch on this a little bit. Reality of conversations in real life are not like what we see online or in TV or on social media, which is usually edited, or it's just really quick and you're just going back and forth, and the conversation seems so smooth, and there's no hums, there's no likes, there's no awkward silences. It's all edited perfectly, so it feels like a smooth conversation. conversation. And mentally, we start to train ourselves to think that that is what a conversation is supposed to look like. And then when you get out into the real world and discover that that's not the case, then suddenly it becomes a little bit scary. And when things get scary and you let fear rule your life, you retreat. And, like we've heard the stories. I've even had conversations with other Gen Zers where there's this sense of like awkwardness, like just like they look uncomfortable, and then because I know they're uncomfortable, I feel uncomfortable. And like I said, we shouldn't. That's normal. That's real life. In real life, conversations aren't fluent and smoothly as we see on TV. Okay, in real life, there is little awkward, quiet silences. We have to think. If somebody asks us our opinion, we think about it, and there's a silence. And that doesn't mean it's awkward. And like I said, normally you wouldn't just retreat or try to evade the conversation. You just kind of go through it, right? Which leads to my other concern, which is headphones or earphones or AirPods. Okay, I can't tell you how many times I go to the grocery store or anywhere and I'm like, oh, how nice. The kid's shopping with his mom and he's like accompanying her and helping her out. And then they turn their head and I see the little AirPods sticking out of the ear. And I'm like, what? I mean, it's, we all hear about, like shoving the tablet in front of the kid's face, but this is what happens in the long run, okay? Those kids that you shove the tablet in their face, they grow up and they don't want any interaction, not even with their own parents, okay? It's so odd. To me, it's so odd. It's so odd to be physically present with someone else and then not talk to them. Like the idea that I can be in an isolated room or situation with someone else and I just don't have any interaction, to me seems so odd. I'm acknowledging that this is the fault and the result of many generations not doing the right things when it comes to raising their kids. But allowing your kid to walk around with their AirPods in and not talk to you the entire grocery store shopping, it only prolongs and contributes to their sense of loneliness in life, okay? Even if they don't feel lonely now, eventually if you continue down that road, you're going to feel lonely as an adult. So it's crazy to see how that, as a kid, the toddler with a tablet grows into a teenager who decides by their own free will. Now, as a kid, it wasn't their choice. I mean, the mom or their dad is the one who introduced the tablet to them. Now, as they get older, they've made out of their own will, their own self-choice to isolate themselves in this way. I've been in social settings where literally we'll be in a group and this one person has AirPods in, like they're listening to music while they're hanging out with us. And yes, I do find that to some extent, I find that rude, but also I know that they don't do it intentionally. It's almost like they don't realize that they come across as rude. In their head, they don't think anything of it. They don't know how off-putting it comes across. In their heads, they're thinking, I want to be cool, or I want to look mysterious or whatever, or I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to put my earphones in. But they have no idea how off-putting, and that further isolates them. And like I said, it does come across as rude. I'm not saying they're purposely being rude. It just comes across as rude. And so maybe it's just a lack of self-awareness and lack of knowing how you come across. Dating especially has become, obviously, it's become a lot more harder and a lot of people are just opting out completely. But more specifically with Gen Z, and I want to mention this because this is very new. This is very recent stuff. As you all know, AI, ChatGPT and everything has come into the conversation, and it's very much something that almost everyone uses now. But when it relates to dating, specifically with Gen Zers, and again, lonely Gen Zers, lonely young people who don't know how to interact, they're even teenagers who hormones are going crazy, but they want that sense of companionship, they want the love, they crave that connection with other people. And again, they're still growing and they're trying to figure things out. And it's like, when you become desperate, you look to things that may not be a great solution. And those who are most susceptible to taking the wrong solution would be kids and teenagers. So sadly, this recent issue that I'm referring to is basically AI relationships. AI relationships, yep, it's a new thing. Maybe you haven't heard of it. It's a thing. Now, from the Gen Zers perspective, I see it's easier, it's online, it's customizable. You could personalize this person. You could literally build your ideal person or your fantasy person. There's no fear of rejection, there's no awkwardness. But at the end of the day, it's not human. Sure, you don't have the risks that go along with dating, but this response is not the solution, okay? It's not real. And you're only making it more difficult for yourself in the long run because you'll have this false assumption that other humans will always do what you want because AI always does what you want. And it just starts to blur the lines completely. I mean, I can't say I'm surprised that the loneliest generation would actually be okay with an AI relationship. In a way, I understand it because, again, it's when all else fails. Sometimes when you're in desperate situations, you turn to anything that gives you even something remotely close to an answer. On top of that, it avoids everything that Gen Z is afraid of. The flirting, the natural awkwardness that comes with dating, the butterflies, just that awkward dating phase. And if this persists, Gen Z is going to miss out on one of the beauties of life and even more. Sadly, this has even had deadly outcomes. I saw this awful story about a 14-year-old boy who died by suicide after he became consumed by a relationship with an AI girlfriend. His mother filed a lawsuit against a tech company, alleging that her teen son became obsessed with talking to an AI chatbot. I mean, guys, I have no words. It genuinely breaks my heart. And I don't mean for anyone to be called out. I don't mean to be down a generation. I'm part of the generation. I just think we have to be honest with ourselves. Like, is this is where the path is leading us? Is this the way we want to go? Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. And that's why I even made this video, is because we have to discuss it so we could come up with real solutions to a growing problem. Speaking of solutions, on the bright side, I want to now transition to solutions because I know it's one thing, it can be really annoying to hear problems. Like, okay, now what? What do we do? What do we do about it? On the bright side, many Gen Zers are aware of it, but they have to have the will to change it. That's a great first step. Not to compare it to alcoholism, I'm just making a point here, is that usually alcoholics, the best time and the best first step that they need in order to overcome their addiction is to admit it and to will to change it. That's the first step. So that gives me hope that many Gen Zers, they've actually had enough and they're done with it. And they're now making an effort to get out of their comfort space and go to book clubs and concerts and local events. Another thing that I would think would help with the solution is to be aware of how pride can get in our way. Pride gets in our way because it makes us afraid to admit stuff or to be honest. Like, out of pride, one may not say, hey, I really want to go out to this concert, but I have no one to go with, and therefore I just don't go to the concert, and you further isolate yourself. Whereas, had you humbled yourself, you could have just made a post on Facebook or Instagram and sure, be weird, but I guarantee you there are other people who feel this exact same way as you. And there are probably other people who want to go to the same concert, maybe a group, and they've just been waiting for the opportunity. So humbling yourself and asking others, inviting people out, don't be afraid to do that. And to not be afraid to do that, to not be afraid of the rejection, of maybe even the humiliation that doesn't even exist from it, but nonetheless, you could feel humiliated, humble ourselves, and to get over that. And that requires putting your pride to the side. Gen Z is also managing to take back control of online resources. And although we've already established that social media and online resources are both a blessing and a curse, some Gen Zers are trying to use online resources to their advantage rather than contribute as a disadvantage. And what I mean by this, well, they're using it now as a stepping stone, okay? It's like having a superpower, and in the beginning, like those movies where in the beginning they don't know how to use their superpower, so they're making a mess with their superpower, and then in the end they finally get control of their superpower, and now they can do good with it. So that's how I kind of see it. Gen Zers are now using it as using it to their advantage and as a stepping stone to find new friendships or platonic relationships, but not relying on it as a crutch. So online methods are being used simply to find other friends, but not keep the friendships online, but rather take them offline and experience them in real life, okay? So another way to think of it is like finding a girlfriend online. Maybe you're on like Bumble or whatever, and the minute you schedule your first date or your second date or whatever, you can delete the app and you meet her in real life and you let the relationship flow naturally after that. That would be an example of using it for good. So you were able to at least find her in a very difficult world setting of meeting people. I understand that that's just the current state of our society and it's hard to meet people, but you use the app to find this person. And then the minute you schedule something, you delete it or you just get off of it and you go back to reality, and you meet this person in real life. You have in-person interactions. So that's what I mean. But not relying on social media or as a way to maintain that communication. All right, like it's basically an online relationship. That's usually becomes a disaster. Basically, my point is to use online methods as a tool, not a barrier. So you should be the master over online methods, but not the other way around. Okay, online apps shouldn't become your master. So again, back to the money argument. Money in itself isn't inherently evil. It's just, it depends on how it's being used. So if the money is running your life because and you become a greedy person, then that's evil. But if you run the money and use it to like fund charities or build hospitals, then that's a good thing. Then you're using money for good and you're the master of it. So same thing with online platforms. It just depends on how it's being used. So to conclude, online platforms aren't inherently evil, but it can be made evil if we make it evil. Okay, another solution would be putting yourself in more social situations. So for example, if you work a remote job, maybe you get a part-time job at your local gym or a coffee shop or something. These types of jobs require, like, you have to have interaction with other people. That's just the point. That's a big part of the job. And therefore, it increases your chances of meeting new friends or possible friends. And there's the obvious too, like joining local clubs and groups in your area. And in past years, we've actually heard people say that there's less young people going to church, for example. But there's good news. That's changing. Okay. So in fact, people are actually noticing that churches are becoming more full, and there's actually more young people going, which is great, especially in the Catholic Church. And I think it's because young people are craving something deeper, a deeper meaning and more purpose to their life. And sometimes when there is a purpose to your life, and once you grow a relationship with God and this purpose, then you start to feel less alone, and you start to focus more on your mission rather than just the state of life. So yeah, I think that's great news. And I think people are tired of hearing the typical atheistic approach to life, and they're looking for something more, something deeper. And my point being, going to church, go join a group at church, to even pray for a friend, for new friendships. Some of you might be cringing that I say that, but tons of people do it. And yeah, all I have to say is ask and you shall receive. Something else I feel like is often forgotten, and I haven't really seen this mentioned in videos that are touching on this similar topic. I think a lot of people forget about mentioning just having a healthy dose of self-awareness and how you come across to others. So sometimes we're focused too much on coming off as cool and even mysterious, like I mentioned earlier. And in our heads, we maybe think we come off as like cool and stuff. But in reality, we actually come off as standoffish and like very overly quiet and really short in conversations. Do not do this. I think even something as simple as smiling. Smile more, okay? Smile even if it doesn't feel natural. Eventually, when I've noticed whenever I'm in a bad mood, especially, the more I smile and the more I start to believe it. And then I just start naturally smiling, okay? Smile more even if it doesn't feel natural, okay? Smiling will make you, and I know some of you might be like, no, don't pretend. It's not that you're pretending. It's that, think about it. Logically speaking, nobody wants to be around what seems to be a Debbie Downer, okay? People are attracted to positive people. People want to be around other positive people who make them feel good, okay? So when you smile, and I don't mean like a creepy or obnoxious smile, I mean just an approachable smile, okay? And that's what I mean. Smiling more makes you more approachable, and especially if you have RBF, which I do have myself. This used to happen to me all the time. I have RBF, and people used to tell me, oh my gosh, like once they finally got to know me, they're like, I thought you were like not a very nice person. I don't know, you just look like you weren't a nice person, and I just thought that, but it turns out you're kind of cool and dorky, but really nice. And I was like, wait, what? No way. I didn't realize I came across as that. I'm like, yeah, like I would just see you. And then I realized I became more self-aware about it. I'm like, okay, I don't want people to feel like that about me. And yes, it's just my natural resting face, and there's nothing I could do about that. But I do want people to feel safe around me, approachable. So I do actively try. And now it feels natural. Now it comes out naturally. I do smile a lot more, because I am a positive people, and I want my outside to reflect my inside, because internally I feel positive and I feel the light, and I want that to be reflected on the outside. Also, look people in the eyes when you talk to them. I think that's something that we've lost, unfortunately, and I think we should make it a comeback. Do not pull your phone out when you're talking to other people. It can come off as rude or like you're not interested in the conversation. It's actually very rude. It's very obnoxious when I'm around people and they just start sending a message, unless they give me like a heads up, like, oh, it's something important, like, I'm so sorry, whatever. But if they just do it and assume, it's very annoying, and it makes me feel like this presentness with me is not important. And then I most likely don't want to hang out with them, and then I most likely would shy away from hanging out with them again. Or earphones, like I said earlier, listening to music, having your AirPods in definitely makes you very off putting. Give people your full attention, okay? It's so refreshing and it makes you so much more likable, whether you feel it or not. Also, when you carry yourself like this with an outward positive sense, it attracts people to you, okay? People want to be around you, like I mentioned. Positivity, that lightness attracts people. All in all, we're seeing a desire across the board to change this negative outcome of loneliness, and especially amongst Gen Zers. And as a result of so many different factors, including social media and the internet and technology, and I have hope, and that's why I'm making this video. I have hope, and I hopefully my solutions can help you if this is something you're dealing with. I hope that Gen Z can turn society around, but in the meantime, you currently right now have the power to turn your life around on an individualistic level and say no to your lonely fate and say yes to a life filled with connection, friendship, and companionship. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked that video, give it a thumbs up. Comment any videos you'd like to see in the future, and thanks again. See you next time.